Well, this meteor falls into Arizona, and our heroes, David Duchovny and Orlando Jones, are sent out to check up on it, and they discovered one-cell organisms in this strange liquid that's in the piece of the meteor. And what happens is these one-celled organisms keep growing. They evolve into more and more complex creatures that eventually threaten the world, and our heroes help.
And this is a comedy, so how has been on the set? Is there any room for improvisation? Have you talked to the actors?
Yeah, always. I like to allow them to, because they're such talented actors and comedians, and they're able to write, and so often there's funny things that they come up with. And my job is to say this is right, this is wrong, and try to incorporate it into the script that's there already.
How do you choose your actors? How was the process of finding them? You had them in mind from the beginning, or how was that?
Pretty much. I mean, David Duchovny, I always thought, had a very, very funny side that we don't see on the X-Files, you know, and he worked with me once on one of the Beethoven movies, and I always remember thinking that he would be a very good leading man in a comedy because he's very handsome, he's very strong, and at the same time he has this very subtle comic sense. And I thought this was a terrific opportunity to work with him.
Visually, as a director, what kind of look are you giving the story? Being a comedy?
Well, it's a comedy, but I'm doing it as if it was a very serious movie, and I think it looks like a very serious movie. And this is probably the biggest movie I ever made in terms of scale. You know, not just the special effects, but the locations. There's lots of cast. There's big army scenes. So there's everything in it.
You're talking about locations. We're right now here. How difficult is to be on locations versus being in sound stages? And does it make it harder or easier?
Well, it's always a little harder because, as you can see today, it's starting to rain a little bit. And yesterday, when we filmed it, it was quite beautiful. And this is the continuation of the scene that we were doing yesterday. But, you know, it's not everywhere that, are you going to follow me? It's not everywhere that you can get to see this. You can't see this on a soundstage. So I think, you know, that's the beautiful thing, that this is what we have over here, and it's very, very special.
Tell us a little bit about the creatures. You have creatures, they're aliens. How is this being processed and getting into the story?
Oh, it's interesting because, you know, the last time I did something like this was with Ghostbusters, and the technology in 15 years has really, really changed quite a lot. And the opportunity to do things and much more elaborate things is possible right now. Phil Tippett, who is our special effects supervisor, you know, did all the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, and he worked in Starship Troopers. So he's dealt with strange creatures before, and we have a very elaborate group of them, from very, very tiny, microscopic ones to something that's much bigger than you've ever seen in a movie.
And this is going to be incorporated as computer, and then will you have something also on set when you're on the soundstage?
A little bit, but it's mostly computer work.
Tell us a little bit about being with, you work with some of the crew. In most of your films, you keep working with them. Is it something that is easier because you understand each other and that way you kind of know? Is that close
Well,
team?
I have a family of people that I've worked with for a long time. The most important are the people who I've produced with for almost 30 years, like Dan Goldberg and Joe Metchuk. But beyond that, there's Michael Chapman. I think this is the 4th movie that he was the director of photography of. Sheldon Kahn, who's my editor, has been working with me since Ghostbusters. Michael Riva, the production designer, I worked with on Dave and on 6 Days, 7 Nights. It's wonderful to be able to work with the same talented people again. We understand each other. We tolerate each other more when we get upset. You understand, it becomes like a large family.
And can you tell us a little bit about the story, the scene that you're doing today?
This is a very important scene in the film. It's when our heroes meet the people that they're going to fight with for the very first time. It's also the time that the David Duchovny character meets the Julianne Moore character, who becomes that becomes an important relationship. And I think it's a very funny scene. It's a complicated scene because it's 6 people moving around all the time, and trying to make that work in a realistic way is a challenge.
Ivan, it's kind of interesting because earlier you talked a little bit about the storyline here. And,
Sorry, I was talking about...
you talked about the story here.
Yes.
You know, we see a lot of alien movies. How is this one different from other ones that we're seeing?
Well, these aren't sort of big aliens who have arrived in a spaceship and landed on Earth. I think it's a much more a subtle story in that we see this creation, which is very much, you know, there are theories about how this planet became created that is very much like the story of this film in terms of how these creatures are created, except in a very short time. And I think it's just a very fresh, new way to tell a story about strange things on our planet.
Earlier you also talked a little bit about the cast. It's kind of interesting because a lot of people actually see David as sort of a straight face.
Yes.
And we always see Orlando in, you know, Mad TV. We know a little bit about
Yes.
that. But how did you bring them together? And would that sort of, do you think it's opposite or attract or kind of tell
Well,
us
I think they're both very, very intelligent. And I love leading characters who seem to be very smart. I think we're attracted to them. And they're both very handsome and very, very funny. And I see them as equals. I don't see, a lot of times when you have comedy teams, and I did it myself in like Twins, you have a big one and you have a small one, or you have a smart one and you have a dumb one. Here is 2 smart, good-looking guys who have a way of challenging each other in a very funny way, which I hope is going to be great.
Orlando is kind of a fresh face right now, and would you say he's like the next Eddie Murphy?
I think he's a very, very talented man who I think has a very, very big future. I think he has great skills. I think this is probably his first really large leading role, and so it's always, you know, it's always interesting to see how people grow into this. He's doing a spectacular job for me, and I certainly think he has the opportunity to be a big star.
You're away from Hollywood shooting this movie, but can you tell us a little bit about the director and director and writer strike that's, you know, expected to happen in Hollywood?
I can't tell you very much. I mean, everybody seems to be pessimistic right now. They feel that this is probably going to happen, and I think it's tragic. I think, you know, the business is very tough right now, and it's a shame that they can't reach a compromise, and hopefully they will before then. Historically, you know, I think the Actors Guild might be able to find a solution. The Writers Guild often doesn't until quite late into things. So I think the opportunity for a strike is very high. In cartoon-like movies like this, but what is starting to happen right now is you have almost realistic where the animation is human animation, not creatures or characters. And you know, I think, you know, the barriers are lowered more and more in terms of what's possible. And the good news is that this opens, you know, another avenue for the imagination up for us as filmmakers. You know, but computers are never going to take over. It all comes from the human brain and from the human soul and our ability to tell stories. It's just another thing, just like a camera and color film and a dolly or a crane. These are all tools for a filmmaker.